Hi, today we're going to be talking about, my name is Mike Roussos, I work from Simbi Training, and we're going to be talking about effective disciplinary hearings from the perspective of the initiator, in other words, the person who's having to bring discipline or disciplinary charges against some employee. Now, it's quite important to bear in mind that discipline often people think about as being HR's job. So if I have a problem, there's a disciplinary issue that I need to deal with, what do? I phone HR, I ask them to please come in and sort it out. It's not the way it works. If you manage people, if you're their supervisor, if you're the person they report to, then discipline is your job. So you have to manage their performance, try and make sure that they do what they need to do to be effective in their jobs. And if they do something wrong, you're supposed to help them to correct it. And ultimately, if it's something really serious, you have to initiate some kind of disciplinary process. So this course is actually about initiating disciplinary charges of some sort or disciplinary process for the people who are the frontline people. In other words, the supervisors, the people who those individuals actually work for. We do have a separate course on chairing disciplinary hearings. This one is not about that, and we will touch on chairing, but really just in passing. So, what are we going to do in this course? We start with a bit of background on the legislation. What kind of legislation is there, and what's the framework within which we work if we are going to be doing discipline in the workplace. First module is really about misconduct. What is misconduct? A few definitions, different categories. What kinds of things would be deemed by the law to be automatically unfair if we dismissed someone for those particular things. There's a bunch of other stuff about how you deal with discipline normally. How do you actually manage someone's performance so that it doesn't get to the point where you're worried about whether you should dismiss the person or not. We'll talk about different kinds of misconduct. Obviously, most companies have a disciplinary code where they define quite specifically what constitutes misconduct in that company. So we'll go through those. We'll focus on some specific types of misconduct because they happen to be quite prevalent and quite important in the modern day workplace. One of them is sexual harassment. We spend a bit of time on that because it's become such a big issue in our businesses generally and in many other organizations, government, NGOs, a whole bunch of different organizations. We will take you through what it takes to do the investigation before you get to the point where you're actually holding a disciplinary hearing. So what kinds of things do we have to do? What constitutes evidence? How do you prepare your case? What sort of things do you have to do in order to present it? Now again, normally people say, well, just call HR, they'll do it. It's not the way it works. The person who's proffering the charges, the person who stands up in front of the hearing and says, I'm the one who's representing the company, has to be the person's supervisor. You can, under certain circumstances, use HR, but it's very unusual. And in most cases, you need to know how to do it because you're the one who's going to have to do it. Then we'll talk about how you actually conduct a disciplinary hearing. We'll take you through the process. We will also talk in that section about how you chair one, but as I say, not very specifically. We'll talk about managing poor performance in general in the next module, and that really has to do with under what circumstances do we end up having to drag somebody before a disciplinary hearing. Rather, we should be managing their performance on an ongoing basis so it doesn't get to that point. So we'll talk a bit about that. And then finally, we'll finish off with some ideas about dispute resolution that help us to prevent getting to that point and prevent us getting into court or getting to the CCMA. So there's a section on what other alternatives do we have if there are disputes in the workplace. Okay, so that's the course for today.